about a minute or two. We'll go ahead and start. I think we have everyone here. So good afternoon, everyone. I just want to explain how a CEASD Zoom session is working. We're asking individuals to hide their videos except for the presenter, Justin, and our two interpreters. We only want 3 videos on screen because many videos on screen, all of those screens become very small and it's hard to see any signing. So we want to make sure that we click hide video and make sure that we're muting so that we have non-video participants. Justin will then lead this discussion and talk about various financial issues. If you have a question or a comment, then go ahead and show your video again, make that comment and question, and then hide your video. Or you also have the option of using the chat box if you want to mention any ideas, questions, or comments. Hopefully everything is clear on that. So I am now going to ask Owen and Catherine, if you wouldn't mind hiding your video. Perfect. So Owen, do you mind hiding your video now? I do want to introduce the person who will be leading this discussion related to finance for Schools for the Deaf. We have Justin Medel. Sorry, I misspelled that at first. Justin Medel, who is the current CFO at Texas School for the Deaf. And he works under Superintendent Claire Bugan. Before, he worked doing at Texas Parks and Wildlife, worked doing for a geological survey department of Texas Water Science Center. And then he has so many other great experiences on his resume. So he has an in-depth knowledge of all of this, and we will be encouraging live discussions based on the topics he presents today. So enjoy this discussion and let's capitalize this opportunity to network and learn new information. So, all right, it looks like we have a good group for discussion. Have fun, Justin.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Can you hear me okay, Katie? Or Lee?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, good afternoon or good morning, depending upon where you're at across the country. Thank you for that introduction, Jeff. My name is Justin Medel. I am the Chief Financial Officer at the Texas School for the Deaf. I've been there for about 4.5 years now. So as Jeff alluded to, my background is a little diverse. I haven't spent that much of my career in education. Past experience includes, senior executive positions with the United States Coast Guard, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Federal Department of the Interior as various accounting director, budget officer, chief financial officer type positions here. But I'm enjoying my time at TSD right now. It's uniquely challenging and it's a little something different. So I've really enjoyed my last couple of years, getting to know the fine people at our school. And it's good to see some fresh faces from around the country as well. So I'm going to try and share my screen right now and see if I can get my handout on here. Can you all see that?
Looks like yes, everyone's responding on the chat box that yes, they can see clear.
Okay, great. So this is a lengthy document that I typed up this morning when the call went out to kind of touch on some of the financial considerations that many of you are going to be dealing with now and for potentially the next couple of years based on the coronavirus. And I wanted to just kind of be open and transparent with what my thoughts are on some of the things that we're looking at here in Texas. And I think many of those lessons would apply to any school, city operation, for-profit business operation here. So some of these things you might know off the top of your head. Some of these things you might not, depending upon your level of experience. and how in depth you've looked at your own finances at your school. But the primary challenge right now is that we're facing potential significant budget reductions here, starting now for the next couple of years until the economy turns back around. We're all familiar with the current state of the economy. Most businesses are closed. Schools are generally closed as well too. And I wanted to talk about what some of the financial impacts of those situations are, and what some of the things that you might want to look at doing to best position your school to kind of get through this storm currently. So, as many of you know, most states get the majority of their funding through sales taxes, real estate taxes, income taxes. With the exception of Texas, there is no state income tax here, and a few other states there. And with 20 million people unemployed across the country, people aren't going out. They're not buying things. They're not going on trips. There's just a significant financial impact across the country right now. So with the states looking at decreased revenues, that usually is going to lead to decreased funding to schools and all layers of government. It doesn't matter if it's Health and Human Services or your local law enforcement entities. Everyone's going to be affected by this here. So the question is, what can you do to prepare your school for a potential decrease in funding? Now, here's the key. Every school is different. Okay, what happens in Texas might not be what happens in Kentucky or California or Delaware. But I would encourage you to know where your primary funding comes from. And that can come from a number of different locations. Directly from your state legislature. You might have funds that come directly from your state education agency. I'm sure every one of you gets some level of federal grant funds or federal reimbursements. I identified a couple of the programs here on the sheet, and feel free to go back to this form later. It's about 6 pages of information, and I'm not going to read it word for word to you, but just to give a high level overview of things here. So some of your additional funding sources might be through donations or endowment funds. You might have interagency contracts with other agencies or even schools in your area. It depends on how you're reimbursed. Once again, every school is a little bit different. So I tried to present this in a more general way as to not get too specific on what happens in Texas, because we're somewhat unique out here ourselves. But hopefully you can relate to most of this here. So the key for you as an administrator or as a CFO is to verify your upcoming revenue projections. You need to ask yourself the question, are we still going to get these grant funds? What direction is student enrollment trending? Some states get revenue based upon the number of students that they're serving. Other programs might just get a base or a fixed dollar amount. That varies from state to state and from school to school. So right now we have 2 choices. We can either increase our revenues to cover any shortfalls, or we can decrease our expenses. And I'll get into the expenses here in just a moment. Your chances of increasing your revenues over the next 1 to 2 years are probably going to be very small. There's just not going to be enough money at the state and local levels to pass out to the schools that are going to be affected by this. So everyone has their hand out. Everyone needs a little bit of help along these lines. But there are some things that you can do internally that can better position yourself to get through these times here. So I would encourage each of you, since we do provide special ed services, there's a number of things that we do for our students that are federally reimbursable. I'll give an example. One of the things that we've been able to greatly expand upon in Texas is the recovery of Medicaid administrative claims and the school health and related services. That's known as SHARS. When we looked into things, it turned out that we weren't maximizing the amount of money that we were bringing in. And so there's always room for improvement there. And so we're getting recoveries from occupational therapists, physical therapists, SLPs, transportation, all of these services that we provide. And we've been able to actually increase that revenue source by a couple of $1 million a year. Now, Texas being one of the larger schools in the country, our numbers might be a little higher than yours are if you're at a smaller or a medium-sized school, but the same principle applies. If there's free money out there, we want to make sure we're getting as much of it as we can to minimize our out-of-pocket costs. So many of you have probably been seeing news articles or may have even been contacted by your state legislative office or education agency talking about potential cuts of anywhere from 5 to 10 to maybe even 20% per year. I was just reading an article right before we got on this call about some locations in New York that could be potentially looking at over 30% cuts. And that's pretty significant here. Hopefully you are all in a better position than that. But the question is, how is this going to impact your programs? And what money might you have already that could be extended and carried forward into next year, depending upon what your fiscal year requirements are? So my advice is to be cautious, be conservative, and honestly plan for the worst. You can always go back and increase your local operating budgets if more funding comes available at that time. But now is the time to be defensive. Now is the time to question everything. So let me get on to the expenditure side. You need to know where your money goes. And as a superintendent or other program manager outside of the business office, some of you may or may not know all of those details, but you need to ask. So what I've outlined are where most of your money is probably going to go, okay? Your biggest percentage is definitely going to be staff salaries. That can range anywhere from 60% to 80% of your overall operating budget. So the people are the single most expensive component to our operating budget. Also, there's health benefits, potentially retirement contributions, depending upon how your school is structured. I would imagine there's probably a school or two out there where the salaries are paid for just at the state level by some other account, and you don't ever have to deal with it. And that's great. But for most of us, we have to cover our own salaries. Your building costs of your facilities and the maintenance of your offices and your classrooms, that's going to be another high dollar cost associated with it. So we want to put our finger on those costs and identify what the expected price to maintain those facilities are going to be over the next 1 to 2 years. And then you have your program costs. It's important to know what percentage of your budget goes to each one of these areas. Now, you may call your programs something different. In Texas, they're actually called strategies, which makes no sense. It's a legislative term, and it's designed to intentionally confuse the general public to be able to follow where the money comes from and where it goes. But you probably break down your budget according to classroom instruction, your related and support services, maybe some CTE, your central administration, etc. What are you supposed to do in this time? You absolutely need to verify not only your current costs, but your anticipated costs. And you need to be honest with yourself in these situations. Are we overstaffed? Are we understaffed? Don't be afraid to make some changes here. What essential services are you legally required to provide? What other things or programs have been elective or nice to have over the years? This would be a good time to ask yourself, is this the right time to give staff raises or bonuses? In most schools, I would probably say no. There may be some schools out there that are in a good financial position that may be able to afford to do something like that. But you need to think of the perception, the public perception of how you would justify that if you had to stand before potentially, a legislator or an oversight agency, or maybe there's a newspaper report that wants to poke around. You want to be careful going out there on a limb, potentially putting money in areas where the general public, through their tax dollars, might question your ability to make proper decisions here. So with so many people out of work right now, this might not be the right time to buy a new bus for your transportation department. Maybe there's some maintenance you can do on that bus to get you by for another year or two until things clear up a little bit. You need to look at your monthly contracts. Anything that you pay on a basis, that could be your copiers, your printers and your copiers in your offices. One of the things that I looked at here in Texas was a very old contract that we had with Xerox, and I felt that they were overcharging us. I felt we had older equipment. It seemed like we could do better elsewhere. So we went out and we recompeted that contract, and actually we ended up saving roughly about $25,000 a year. So $25,000 here, $10,000 there, $50,000 over there. It all adds up to some sizable dollar amounts. So you want to look at your contracts. Think about when was the last time you went out and got fresh bids, entertained a different vendor. A lot of companies right now are scrambling for your business, and many of them are willing to make some decent price cuts just to have something coming in on their end. So there are some advantages to this time period here, where it's difficult for most, but if you come around, there are some bargains to be had. Think about your utilities. Right now, schools are closed.
Justin?
Your utility costs. Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Your
Yes.
voice, it's very staticky and very difficult to understand.
Okay. I'm in the middle of a storm right now, and I am going to shut down, and I'm going to come right back in.
Okay, I'm going to shut down and connect again. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now.
Okay, stand by. Going to share screen again. Okay. Bear with me, my toolbar is not working properly here to share video. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes, they can see it.
Okay, great. All right, sorry for that. We're under a flood warning and a tornado watch right now, so. All right, so we were talking about contracts and utilities. You should be saving some money right now because you don't have people going in and out of your buildings all the time. So increase the temperature up to 78 degrees or 80 degrees if the building's not going to be used for an extended period of time. That saves money over the long run. Look at items that might need to be fixed or maintained. You know, I ask a question, if there's a problem with an air conditioner or a heating system, can that wait until next year? Every dollar counts right now, and you want to save as much cash as you can because we know things are going to get a little bit worse before they get better here. But primarily, your largest expense items are salaries for the staff and your facilities cost. Don't be afraid to implement a hiring freeze to put the cap on your salary costs here. You can cut your utilities expenses. You can reduce the number of printers and, you know, and buy less office supplies. But for every staff member you hire, that could be $40,000 or $60,000 just for one person. So we need to look at that closely here. Another thing that you should do right now for the current year is check with your accounting staff and your purchasing or contracting department over in business services, and just check on the status of any orders that you've already placed that are still open. Make sure, are they still valid? If they're not valid, you can cancel that order and you can get that money back. Every little bit helps right now. For next fiscal year, for us, I'm going to question whether we need to have anybody travel or do they need to attend any training. All of those things are discretionary and nice to haves. And right now, my number one goal is to ensure that I can cover the payroll for all the salaries of our staff. Okay. Also, your cafeteria most likely is closed. So you're not spending money right now buying food. Okay. While you're not going to get your reimbursement from the National School Lunch Program, at least you're not paying for food that's going to waste right now. So there should generally be minimal food purchases, if any, happening right now. Also, you're not putting fuel in your buses. Your buses aren't running. That's not costing you any money. That's a cost savings there. So all of those cost savings, can they help establish virtual classroom costs, buy you new thermometers or hand washing stations? That's up to you. As far as relief funding coming from the federal government and the states, I haven't seen anything specifically that's going to authorize the reimbursement to schools who are suffering financially due to the COVID virus. That doesn't mean something's not going to come down the road, but right now I haven't seen anything that's specific to us. But here's some key points. Have a good relationship with your chief financial officer or your business manager. Don't be afraid to ask for their input and admit if you don't know something. We're here to help. We want to make your job easier for you, and we want to give you the tools and resources you need to do your job as the superintendent, okay? You should be asking for monthly reports from your business office. This is an important thing here. They need to be simple and easy to read and understand. It shouldn't be difficult. You should be able to follow along with them. Share these reports with your management staff. That helps them further understand the importance of every decision at a school has a financial cost tied to it. It also helps their professional development. And the more people you can have on your staff that understand the budget, the easier your job is going to be, because then you have multiple people looking at ways of saving money and questioning, why we're doing certain things here. Your business office should be able to explain financial reports in simple, plain language. If they can't explain what's going on, how the money works, where it goes, there's a problem, and you need to investigate a little bit further. My number one point, though, is don't make this any more difficult than it needs to be. If you all remember, maybe up until about 10 years ago, we all used to carry around a checkbook. We'd go to the store and we would write a check out, and then after that, we would write the amount out in our checkbook register. Think about this as a large checkbook register with just a lot more money in it than our personal accounts happen to have here, okay? We need to verify the amount of money coming in. We need to constantly check on the status of that money coming in to make sure that it's still going to come in, whatever that amount is. And we need to manage how much is going out. So just like your personal checking account, can you spend more than you bring in on a monthly or an annual basis? No, you'll run out of money. So keep it simple. I like my financial statements to benefit everybody who looks at them. I don't think you need to be a certified public accountant or have a master's degree in finance to be able to understand how much money we have left and where we're at throughout the course of the year. Keep it simple. Now, as far as where do we go from here, I'm planning for the worst. I'm being extraordinarily cautious at this time. Fortunately, the Texas School for the Deaf is in a very good financial position, but that's through some very aggressive cost savings that we have accumulated over the last few years. And we accumulate those balances exactly for times like this, where if I don't get money from a federal grant, or if expenses come in a little higher than expected on a program, it's okay because we've got a little bit of money in reserves to kind of get through that here. So be cautious, be conservative, and question everything. Every expense moving forward needs to be reviewed and validated. And that's something that I think you should be doing on an annual basis. After a while, you kind of get the hang of it and you know where your money's coming from and where it's going. But don't be afraid to open up those communication channels early on with your staff. Be transparent, be honest. I think they will thank you for that there. Any questions so far? Nothing? Okay. All right. One of the other things that Claire brought up with me last week when she told me about this group was, talking about the impacts to school openings and the financial considerations associated with that. What I've also included on this document are some risk management considerations and some strategies that you may want to look at. The document, I think, does a pretty good job of looking at most of our primary, health and safety issues. The reason I'm interested in this is because risk management and security falls under me at the Texas School. So I have my hands in a lot of different operations, including transportation, cafeteria, risk management and security, all those other little programs there. So, but I think this document will do a good job of giving you a kind of a framework of where to build from, the type of questions you should be asking yourself, asking your staff. And these cover everything from in what order should staff come back to work? You know, who should be responsible for what areas? What's a new normal schedule looking like? There's definitely additional considerations if you have a residential component to your school as well, which TSD has. And so we're trying to balance fairness and equity for all of our students, all of the legal requirements for special education, but then having to use some of our own common sense and create a safe, functioning school environment for our kids when they come back. And that's going to be exceptionally challenging. And unfortunately, we don't really have a playbook for this, because this is the first time in our lifetimes that we've had to deal with something like this on this type of a scale here. But I would encourage you to look at this document and feel free to steal from it, and you'll get some new ideas. All the safety barriers, how to maintain social distancing, who should be purchasing the protective equipment. All of these things have a cost associated with them. How do you avoid cross-contamination? You've got staff crisscrossing your campus. You've got janitors and mechanical folks that are fixing things. And never mind the students. Kids love talking to each other closely. They love touching each other closely, and that creates some exceptional challenges for us here. Mitigating staff fears, lowering those staff fears is going to be a critical component. You need to be comfortable with being in the spotlight, professional at all times. They're looking to you for that guidance, and just be honest. We're trying to be very transparent here in Texas with constant website updates. We send out frequent letters to the families of all students and all of our support staff, so people are in the loop, so they know that we are actively working on this. Even though many of them might be working from home, the job still continues. So this even talks about who's going to ensure that a building is properly sanitized, and some of the areas that we might not think of all the time, such as the copier room or the elevator buttons, if you have an elevator on your campus. All of these are areas of high risk of potential transmission. Who's gonna pick up the mail? How are you going to ensure that any packages or letters that are delivered on campus when you come back have been properly sanitized? If you collect cash, for example, I have a cashier office on our campus, and we have these activity funds and these little student trust funds where kids can come in and handle cash transactions on the campus. How do we maintain their safety and the safe handling of the money that's coming in and the money that's going out? All things to think about. Do you have a longer term plan for certain staff to work remotely for a longer period of time? I'll give you an example from my perspective. In the last 2 months, I've been convinced that a lot of my business services functions can be handled remotely from home to some extent. Maybe we reduce the staff that are on the campus, and maybe my business staff only works on site 2 days a week, and then they work from home 3 days a week. I still have to come in, and I still have to sign for contracts, and I still have to sign checks and release money. But a number of the things that we're doing now don't require us to be in such close proximity with each other. So keep an open mind about that. What works for some might not work for others, but don't be afraid of a little bit of change. I think this provides some opportunity to enhance our business processes, and things that we thought were essential 3 months ago turned out they really weren't as important now, considering this circumstance, and vice versa. So, any questions? Okay, I see a question. How can you obtain a copy of the visual presentation? I emailed that to Barbara here within the last hour, and she's welcome to distribute that to the group as a whole. And additionally, if you'd like maybe an example of a financial statement, I'd be happy to share an example of kind of what we've developed in Texas to help non-financial people get a better handle on where the money is going and where we stand financially. At the end of the day, it's not my money, it's taxpayer dollars, it's grant funds. My job is just to administer them, make sure we have enough to cover our bills, and spend it wisely here. So thank you, Barbara, for your conversation on the chat. She'll be sending that out on the next mailing, and it's also attached to this chat feature right now. Also, I'll make myself available if you find yourself, short-staffed at your school, or you have a question that something doesn't make sense that your business office is telling you. Please feel free to email me, or you place a phone call, VP through an interpreter, and I'd be happy to help you out with any questions that you might have. I'm trying to keep this pretty generic right now without getting into the weeds of how all of this stuff works. But please feel free to touch base with me if you do have questions, or something just doesn't make sense, or hey, my accountant gave me this report and I don't know what it's saying. I'm happy to try and break it down in plain language English, because it really is just a big checkbook. Think back to that old checkbook that you used to walk around with 10 or 20, 30 years ago. And if you can keep a checkbook register with how much money you have coming in, and you're properly tracking how much money is going out, and you're validating those charges, you should be able to generally manage these budgets here. I want to keep them as simple as possible because not everybody speaks my language. And I want the end user to understand how to use their division budget or their department budget, because the easier I make it for them, the easier it is for me to make good financial decisions along the way. Okay. Any other questions?
Hello, hi. Yes, I just wanted to kind of jump in here. I know Jeff is busy on another Zoom call, but I wanted to really encourage people to ask any questions or make any comments. Let's have a good discussion. Are you doing something different in your schools? How are you approaching things? Anything we need to know about? I mean, if there isn't anything, then we can wrap up the meeting, but I want to make sure everyone has a chance to comment.
Hi, this is Catherine Granier with the Special School District in Louisiana. I was wondering, you had mentioned the Medicaid reimbursement recovery, and I will probably contact you offline to see if we can discuss about your best practices, and maybe we can actually discover more money like you did.
Fantastic. Yes, please feel free to reach out to me. You can drop me an email. I'm working from home several days a week, but your contact number, and I'd be happy to give you a call and walk you through that process. Just to give you an example, 4 years ago when I first started,
And Justin,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you again. You've become a static robot once more. Just insane. Sorry about that.
Would you like me to log off again and come back?
Yeah, I think you may have to log out and log back in. Okay, I know that Justin has stepped out for a while, but I want to make sure that you know about a lot of this. If you have any questions or if you have any thoughts, ideas, something that may not work at school or something that is working at your school, please capitalize on this time right now to propose any ideas or ask any of those questions. This is your opportunity to connect with other schools and what they're doing at that time. So use this platform to jump in and have that dialogue. For example, I know right now in terms of federal funding, there's some monies a part of Title I, Title II, Title III. You may have already discussed this, but can we use those funds and how can we access those funds in order to, support professional development maybe or support other areas? So let's have these discussions about different strategies and how we can benefit from all of the funding that is out there. I know that there's a personal protection plan. It may not be related to some of the schools, but some state schools can use monies related to that as long as we have that strategy. So money is out there. How do we then navigate that system to really capitalize on those funds to support and benefit our kids? So use this time.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to go back to the question from the woman in Louisiana. As an example, about 4 years ago, Texas, we were only pulling in about $750,000 a year through our Medicaid claims and the school health and related services. Learning a little bit more about the program with my background coming from federal agencies and spending a lot of time with federal grants, we dug a little bit deeper, and it turns out that we were eligible to start claiming a lot more. And my most recent cost report that we just got last week looks like we're going to be getting about $3.9 million in. And so we've increased our Medicaid allocation by probably 400%, 300, 400% here in the last few years. And that's millions of dollars that's being refunded to us. So we paid for it on the front side, and then we submit our claims through Health and Human Services, whoever your state agency is that administers those claims. And we've been able to maximize a lot of areas such as transportation and some of our other specialists, our health services department in particular as well. So if you buy Band-Aids, it's reimbursable. If you buy a thermometer, it's reimbursable. To what extent, that number varies each year, but generally speaking, you're probably going to get back at least 50 cents on every dollar that you spend.
Thank you. That's great information. I will be reaching out to you.
Great. Any other questions? Well, either I did a great job or I don't know.
Can you all see me okay? This is Jason speaking. Can you see me okay? Yeah. Okay. First of all, I want to thank you. I'm from the Tennessee School for the Deaf, so I want to thank you. You did a great job explaining all of this information. I think that helps to just remind me, you know, in 2008, we had just a big crash in terms of our budget. I think there was about a 25% cut. And so this reminded me to kind of look back at that time, and, you know, it's just been nerve-wracking to kind of face that again. Anyways, I really appreciate your comments in terms of, you know, things that we can consider. I know that my team is also working hard and are deep in discussion about different strategies and ideas. And so this document and things that you mentioned today had things that we did not yet consider. So that's going to be very helpful. Our department does work a lot with the Medicaid, Medicare stuff, similar to CEASD. We are trying to start working on the Medicaid billing a little bit more, but there's just a lot of information being passed around, and it's a lot of work. It's not an easy workload. And so looking at that and how critical it can be, I am just wondering, how much work is required to really submit the billing for those services? What does that workload look like?
That's a great question, and thank you for your comments. In our experience, what we have done is we have hired a third-party vendor who has online submission and web-based interface to submit everything that we do. So we started out years ago with just a lot of paper. I mean, boxes and boxes of paperwork that needed to be manually entered, manually filed, manually submitted. That took up such a large percentage of our staff time that it didn't allow for us to actually maximize our revenue reimbursements from that program. So we hired a company called MSB, and for a percentage of each check that we get, we pay them 7% of everything that's run through their system. They audit everything. They are the ones who are responsible for the final submission to our state agency. And it's kind of like hiring an accounting firm to do your taxes every year. They take the responsibility, but they take a small percentage of it. So when I looked at the overall numbers, if I could increase my recovery rate by 300%, I've got no problem giving them 7% of that. For me, it was the cost of doing business. And with them, they have an entire team that they'll come to our campus. They're available virtually. They're always available by phone or email or through VP. And they provide us top quality service because they want us to maximize the amount coming into us so they can also increase their share from that 7%. That was our secret, because doing it line by line, staff member by staff member, it's a full-time job. You could hire a person to spend their entire year doing nothing but chasing down receipts and paperwork and time cards. I don't think that's very efficient. And so going through a third party has been the biggest change, to bring in the experts to maximize our revenue.
This is Jen Pizziforato. I'm Director of Finance and Operations at American School for the Deaf. And Justin, just to tack on to what you were saying, from a collection perspective too, not only for submitting things, you know, out, but to get the collection piece in, because chasing down money can be a full-time job as well. So I think having the expert and having a third party for the insurance claims is valuable for both pieces.
I agree, Jen. It's a win-win. They have skin in the game. We have skin in the game. They want us to file on time because they want to get their cut. Makes sense. And I just can't express enough about how important it was for us to go to a third-party expert company. Now, there's several of them out there, and they all charge different rates. but don't necessarily focus only on the rate. You want to look at the system, you want to look at the people, you want to know that everything's available online, that it's easy. You want to make it as easy as possible for your staff members to collect and submit this information. So the company that we use, we get weekly emails and links to their websites in which we need to certify certain things that, oh, this OT or PT or SLP has to certify the number of hours that they were working with Johnny or Sally in 2nd grade or 8th grade. They create the work list. It's all automated, very much like we all get email these days. You have a work list and you work through it. A lot of it's just checking or unchecking boxes. So we can set up a standard calendar that, hey, I know that 25 hours a week, my SLP is going to be working with these students. And it goes through automatically unless she unchecks the box and says, I didn't meet with Johnny or Sally on Tuesday at 10 a.m. So it automatically reduces that 1 hour. So it's simplified everything. But I think that's your biggest potential funding source out there that most schools aren't going after. And especially since, you know, we're 100% special ed, just about everything we do has some percentage of reimbursement available. And if it's not reimbursable through SHARS or Medicaid, there are other programs out there that you need to be looking at. If you get on grants.gov, there are thousands of federal grants out there. Not necessarily just the IDEA funding, not just school lunch program funding, not just the Carl Perkins, you know, grant program for CTE. There are thousands of grants out there. And I remember when I worked for the Department of Homeland Security and overseeing about $1 billion worth of grants, that there were times where we were just calling people and begging for them to apply because we had to get rid of the money by the end of our fiscal year. So we've also established some contacts with these grantor agencies, and we've let them know that, hey, if you have extra money laying around at the end of the year, if there's a project you think that we might be able to support, please consider us. And we've been able to pull in over $1 million in the last 2 or 3 years just for dual college credit classes through our state workforce commission. So they're paying the cost of interpreters, they're paying for all new welding equipment, they're paying for all new automotive mechanics, new lifts and new computer programming classes. And I would much rather spend their money as opposed to spending mine. So those are other things to think about as well too. So $100,000 here and $200,000 there, it really adds up over the long term there. I'd also be considerate about hiring permanent employees. Maybe this is a time due to these unknown conditions that you want to hire people on a temporary basis if you have that authority. Maybe you hire them for a period up to 12 months or up to 24 months, but then it builds in that ability for you to go back later and say, okay, we no longer have the funding to continue this, we're going to have to let you go. Because bringing on a permanent employee, especially if your school is overseen by a state legislature, such as Texas, it's very difficult to get rid of somebody if you need to cut them due to various labor laws and personal protections that government employees have. So these are all just things to think about. Anything else? Okay. Well, no further questions?
Okay. Well, so glad everyone's been able to join us today. This is a lot of great information. So thank you, Justin, giving us a lot to think about. I've learned quite a bit. And I want everyone to know that that file is at the very top of the chat box. If you scroll up, you can find it there. And I will also disseminate that to everyone, to all the emails about our meetings. So that way you'd be able to access it there as well. And so it seems that Justin's also available for your questions later on. So thank you so much and really appreciate the information. And thank you all for joining us today. And we'll see you next time. And I see a question about Justin's email address. Oh, do you want to type that into the chat box, Justin?
Yes, I'll go ahead and do that now.
Also, if everyone wants to come on, say goodbye to everybody. Jeff saying, okay. I do want to say a quick thank you to Justin. Wonderful session today. And all of you do need to know anytime that you have some questions, you can reach out to Justin, reach out to some of the other folks who've been online today. And we will also record this video and save that along with the transcript. So everything will be available to you online to check out again at a later date. If something you want to refresh your memory with or make connections with, that'll all be available. And it's always so nice in the workplace to know that we're not alone. There's 70 other deaf schools across the US. So be in touch with them, connect with one another, partner with one another, and we can always do better by doing that. Okay. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Claire, for loaning Justin to us. We do appreciate that. Thank you. You can't steal him though. Oh no, I have no intention to steal him. All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, good to see you.
Barbara and Jeff, thank you so much for having me. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right, take care, everybody. Stay safe.